And we're back in session. Douglas, we need to make sure that our item that we're ready to present is item 15 and take our public facing notice off of lunch break. Great. All right. Paul, we're very much looking forward to your state and federal legislative briefing.
Thanks. Commissioners, tab 15 is an action item to accept the staff report on state legislation being monitored. Staff are not recommending the commission adopt any positions on bills at this time. However, I wanted to provide a brief update on the 3 bills on which the commission has already taken a position this session. First, the commission is supporting SB 339 by Senator Wiener, which would authorize a new road charge pilot program to test revenue collection. This was one of the commission's legislative recommendations, and staff have been working closely with Senator Wiener's office on the bill and have testified at legislative hearings as the lead witness in support. The bill passed out of Senate Transportation Committee and now is pending in the Senate Appropriations Committee. And second, the commission's also supporting AB 604 by Assemblymember Daly, which would implement another of the commission's recommendations. This would dedicate the interest earnings in the road maintenance and rehabilitation to the SHOP program. And this bill passed out of the Assembly Transportation Committee on consent and is now with the Assembly Appropriations Committee. And finally, the commission has an opposed position on AB 786 by Assemblymember Cervantes due to concerns that it would take away the commission's appointing authority over the executive director that's provided to other state boards and commissions and run counter to the commission's status as an independent agency. This bill was not scheduled for a policy committee hearing in the Assembly prior to the legislative deadline, so it therefore will not be moving forward this year. And I wanted to provide a brief update on the Commission's 2 budget proposals that were included in the governor's January budget. First, both the Senate and Assembly subcommittees have approved the Commission's proposal to make 8 of our positions permanent. The Commission had received these positions on a limited term basis for 2 years to help with Senate Bill 1 implementation. And second, both Houses subcommittees heard and held open the Commission's proposal to adjust the statutory local streets and roads maintenance of effort requirement temporarily due to the effects of COVID-19, which has had a great impact on city and county budgets. So the subcommittees will revisit this proposal in the future. And finally, regarding federal legislation, I think Secretary Kim already provided an update on our joint efforts to engage with the California congressional delegations, so I won't go through that again in the interest of time, and I will conclude my report and staff recommends.
Paul, before we take a position on your entire report, I'd like to make a motion based on the presentations that were made today with the governor's Clean Up California proposal, that the CTC write a letter of support for that Clean Up California proposal as it goes through the legislature for consideration in the budget.
Second. Thank
you very much. Douglas, could you please read the roll on this motion, and then we'll include this motion and a vote on the entire package of recommendations that Paul just made?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Alvarado.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Eager.
Aye.
Commissioner Grisby.
Aye.
Commissioner Guardino. Commissioner Inman.
Aye.
Commissioner Kehoe.
Aye.
Commissioner Liu.
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez.
Aye.
Commissioner Tavaloni.
Aye.
Chair Norton.
Aye.
Chair, the motion is approved.
Thank you. And now we'll take a motion on the entire report.
Motion to approve Martinez?
Do you have a second?
Second by Woodman.
Thank you. Douglas, could you please do the roll?
Commissioner Alvarado,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Eager,
Aye.
Commissioner Grisby,
Aye.
Commissioner Guardino, Commissioner Inman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kehoe,
Aye.
Commissioner Liu,
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez,
Aye.
Commissioner Tavaloni,
Aye.
Chair Norton.
Aye.
Chair, the motion is approved.
Thank you very much. And now we'll move to the informational item on the budget and allocation capacity. Paul?
Commissioners, this is an information item. Caltrans will provide an update on the state budget, as well as the Commission's remaining allocation capacity for this fiscal year. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Keith Duncan from Caltrans Budgets to provide the update.
I don't think the mic is.
Are you ready? We can't hear you. Yep, you need to take yourself off mute. Can you
There
try
we go.
again?
Am I coming through now?
You are.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. It looks like the administrative tool just kicked on. My sincere apologies. Madam Chair, Commissioners, Senator Newman, and respected guests, as Paul mentioned, my name is Keith Duncan with Caltrans Division of Budgets, and today I'll be providing the budget and allocation capacity update. Next slide, please. To begin, through March, the Commission's allocated about $3.3 billion of the total $7 billion allocation capacity across all transportation programs. This represents about 47% allocated through March. This is quite a bit lower than we would like to see at this time. We're already a little more than 3/4 through the fiscal year. In speaking with many of the program managers, they are looking at the various projects that were scheduled to come in for allocation for the rest of this fiscal year. Those projects that may not come to fruition, they're looking to potentially move projects from outer years into the most current year so we can get that allocation capacity to work on projects. As a result, you will see more advancements coming in for your consideration, both for this May meeting over the next 2 days, as well as coming forward for June. So I will be keeping watchful track on that capacity percent allocated. Next slide, please. This next slide, we just wanted to show you a comparison of how the current fiscal year of 2021 compares to prior fiscal years when it comes to the allocation percent through as we progress. There at the bottom, you can see the green line that represents the current 2021 fiscal year. Beginning in August through about December, it did mirror the prior fiscal year of 1920. And then from December through about March, you started to see a separation. So you can see how the current fiscal year is trailing the other fiscal years. Based on the current agenda, and peering through it earlier today, we have about $1.2 billion for your consideration. Assuming those do move forward for allocation, that would raise the percent to the low to mid 60% for May. So you can see that would start to fall in line with the prior fiscal years. And we understand June is going to be quite busy as well. So we're encouraged, slightly encouraged and optimistic to see how much is going to be allocated. As a reminder, any allocation capacity for the respective programs that does not get allocated this fiscal year will roll over to next fiscal year. So it will still be made available for the respective programs to allocate. Next slide, please. Next, we wanted to share a brief transportation revenue update. As mentioned previously by Executive Director Weiss, the transportation revenue is projected to be lower for the current fiscal year as a result of the pandemic, roughly about $1 billion combined across all transportation revenue sources. And as based on the data through April, you can see bottom line, we are pretty close to being spot on for those reduced projected revenue amounts. We're about a little less than 1% of revenue received as compared to the projected item. When you look at each item in particular, gasoline excise continues to underperform, but both diesel excise, diesel sales taxes, in addition to weight fees and transportation improvement fee, continue to come in higher than originally projected. So that does helps us in the overall transportation revenue sources there. Again, projected through April was to be about 9.6 billion, and so far actual a little more than 9.5 billion received through April. So we're encouraged that no further impacts that we can see besides what was initially projected. Next slide, please. Next slide, just to provide you a brief calendar of upcoming events. As has been mentioned by previous speakers, the May Revise is expected to be released later this week. Given the timing, no updates to provide at this point in time for the Commission, but we will work with Commission staff as well as work for the upcoming June meeting to provide any budgetary updates in related to our transportation budget, any significant changes that may come out as a result of the May Revise. In the month of June, obviously we have the anticipated budget to be passed by the June 15th statutory date and anticipated to be signed no later than June 30th. And then also for the upcoming Commission meeting in June, we will plan to present you the draft 21-22 allocation capacity. Again, that will be based on prior adopted fund estimates across the transportation programs. And then as we go to the next fiscal year, anything that's not allocated for the current year will just be added to those draft allocation capacities as we lead into the 21-22 fiscal year. And without beating on it too much, obviously September into September, the FAST Act extension is set to expire. So we're eagerly anticipating what may come to fruition come October 1st. Next slide, please. With that, I'd like to thank CTC staff, Caltrans programming staff, as well as Budget's revenue forecast team for their help with today's presentation, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. I see that we have no public comment on this item. I wanted to ask you, while I'm waiting to find out if I have commissioners who have a question for you, how you see the gasoline excise tax moving throughout the rest of this year, especially given the increase in gas prices and now much more roadway travel coming back after the pandemic and the economy coming back in June.
We do, and based on Department of Finance, working very closely with them as part of the Jan 10 budget release, as well as what we understand is going to be part of the May Revise. We do anticipate the gas excise tax will continue to be slightly less than what was originally projected, but we do continue to see that recovery as we go into the next fiscal year. While it will still take a couple years before we get to those pre-pandemic levels, even with the price increase, it is projected to continue to recover or increase over the next couple years. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioners, do you have any questions? If not, thank you so much for this presentation, and we look forward to seeing you in June.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, we're going to go to item 17, the 2022 STIP and Aeronautics Fund estimates. Paul and Keith.
Commissioners, tab 17 is an action item to approve the assumptions that will be used to determine funding levels for the 2022 SHOP and STIP programs. You saw a draft of the assumptions at the March meeting, and there have been no notable changes since that time. Staff have reviewed the assumptions proposed by Caltrans and are recommending approval. And with that, I will turn it to Keith to present the assumptions.
Thank you, Paul. And again, Keith Duncan, Caltrans Division of Budgets, Madam Chair, Commissioner, Senator Newman, and respected guests, I'll provide you the update regarding the 2022 fund estimate final assumptions. Next slide, please. To begin, just some brief background as we shared in previous commission meetings. The fund estimate process is a collaborative effort working with the department as well as commission, and in between commission meetings, working very closely with commission staff to finalize the general assumptions. These assumptions are the critical aspect in moving forward to the next step, which is developing the actual fund estimate itself. These assumptions set revenue-based as well as set standards when it comes to the commitments. We'll say the basic math behind it, revenue minus commitments equals the available capacity over the next fund estimate cycle. The fund estimate obviously does directly impact both the STIP and the SHOP programming capacity, so making it as accurate as possible is critical. Any overestimation or underestimation of available capacity has dire impacts to either potentially having to program additional projects or deprogram projects. So we definitely take special care in this deliberative effort in trying to develop the most accurate fund estimate as possible. Knowing that the May Revise being released later this later this week, as well as the legislative process prior to the governor's budget being enacted. The assumptions are based on current proposals included in the governor's budget. As the budget is enacted, if there's any changes that may impact our assumptions, we will provide updates to commission staff as well as to commissioners as we go through into August for the planned adoption of the 2022 fund estimate. And also, as has been previously shared, the Federal Transportation Act status. The FAST Act is set to expire, but since that is the current federal level funding that we have at this point in time, that's the basis that we're using for the federal revenues. Until a new Transportation Act is enacted, we wouldn't be able to utilize any new or newer numbers until that time. Next slide, please. As previously been shared, the fund estimate is a snapshot in time. It's a forecasted programming capacity for the next 5-year period, and it never ceases to amaze us. After the adoption of each of the fund estimates since 2002, there has been some form of legislation or policy change that does impact the numbers included in that fund estimate. The slide before you just shows some of the items that came into fruition after the adoption of previous 3 fund estimates. Most recently, the 2020 fund estimate. Shortly after adoption, the pandemic started to impact our transportation revenues. The benefit of adopting the fund estimate every 2 years does allow us to refresh those numbers, taking into the most recent legislation or statutes into account when it comes to projecting what the next 5-year projected capacity may be. And also included in statute, the commission is able to, if as planned, we do adopt the 2022 fund estimate, if there is any major revenue or commitments change that do drastically impact the adopted fund estimate, the commission is able to adopt an amended fund estimate up to March 1st. So we do have a little bit of time if needed. So we just wanted to provide that bit of clarification that was recently asked about what kind of deadlines we're looking at when it comes to the adoption of the fund estimate. Next slide, please. So for the next couple slides, just to kind of focus on just the 2 primary revenue sources when it comes to the 2022 fund estimate. The first being the state revenue piece, and that's the economy's impact on revenue. As Paul mentioned, we have no significant changes. We are continuing with our primary recommendation, which is to use the Department of Finance projections when it comes to fuel consumption. The Department of Finance is the most prevalent known for the state because it takes into account state policies as well as any projected changes that are concentrated mainly on the state of California. Other indices and measurements that we have researched do involve more national impacts, and the Department of Finance does update their numbers every 2 years, so we know we have the most refreshed numbers. The numbers that we will be using will be updated when the May revise comes out. And if any changes happen when the budget is enacted for the upcoming fiscal year, we'll make sure to update that for the final fund estimate that is presented to you for adoption. But we will make sure to provide those updates to you if anything does happen. Next slide, please. For this next slide, we just wanted to show how the items or the alternatives that we researched compare. The green line represents our recommended option, which is the Department of Finance. And you can see the kind of the ups and downs in comparison. It's not just a straight line. That takes into account future policy concerns or initiatives that may be coming into place, such as the implementation of additional electric vehicles into our statewide fleet and the impacts to state excise revenue. The good news when sharing this slide is you can see of the alternatives we did research, you can see the differences. The bandwidth is relatively small. So understanding and seeing that these alternatives are pretty close to each other gives us a little bit of comfort knowing that the recovery, or at least the projected revenue numbers, are pretty consistent across most of the indices that we've looked at. Next slide, please. For the other revenue option, which has to do with federal revenues, as previously mentioned, since there is no new federal act that's been enacted, we're continuing to use the FAST Act as the basis, and there is no change from the prior recommendation, which is to be a little more aggressive. Over the 5-year FAST Act period, there was an annual increase of about 2.7%. So we're looking to continue with that 2.7% increase over the fund estimate period, as compared to the lower escalation rates that were under consideration. Next slide, please. Here, we just wanted to show how the different alternatives compared. The line there at the bottom is just a straight line, assuming there was no increase when it comes to the annual federal funding for the next transportation period, as well as the next line, which showed a gradual increase of about 1.3, 1.4% increase year after year, and the green line, which is our recommended option, which is a 2.7 annual increase on a year-to-year basis. Next slide, please. So the next steps, following approval of our final assumptions today, we will then be working aggressively and quickly to finalize the draft fund estimate to present to you in June at the June meeting. We will make sure as part of that presentation, prior to that as well, we'll be working with commission staff to provide any updates, any revisions to these assumptions as a result of the release of the May revise. And then also we continue to plan for the final fund estimate to be adopted at the August 2021 commission meeting. We do continue to provide the reminder that back in January, the commission did adopt a resolution that did open up the opportunity to extend. We could potentially delay the adoption of the fund estimate up to 90 days within government code allowance. Next slide, please. With that, again, I'd like to thank CTC staff, Caltrans programming, as well as our Caltrans budgets fund estimate management team for their help with today's presentation, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. I see that we have no public comment at this time. Commissioners, do you have any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for this presentation. We look forward to seeing you in June.
Thank you very much.
Okay. With that, we're going to move to the Active Transportation Program Augmentation Proposal. And I will say
Madam
that
Chair?
yes, sir.
Tab 17 was an action item.
Oh my gosh, of course. So sorry.
Moved by Commissioner Liu.
Second. Douglas, could you please read the roll?
I'm sorry, who made the second? Was that you, Chair?
Yes, it was.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Alvarado?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Commissioner Eager?
Aye.
Commissioner Grisby?
Aye.
Commissioner Guardino? Commissioner Inman?
Aye.
Commissioner Kehoe?
Aye.
Commissioner Liu?
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez?
Aye.
Commissioner Tavaloni?
Aye.
Chair Norton?
Aye.
Chair, the motion is approved.
Thank you very much. And thank you for reminding me about proper process. I just wanted to make the point that we are going to hear item 18 on the ATP augmentation proposal. And then we are going to move to item 24 on the CAPDI program. There's many people who are coming to speak on both of these items, and we wanted to make sure that we had these items, and then we will go to our timed hearings for the SRISA and the STIP guidelines. So with that, we're going to go from 18 to 24 and then back to 19. With that, Paul, could you please present the Active Transportation Program item?
Commissioners, tab 18 is an information item on funding for the Active Transportation Program, also known as the ATP. At the March Commission meeting, staff were directed to submit a request for a $2 billion one-time augmentation for the ATP from the state's significant unanticipated general fund surplus in order to address the substantial backlog of unfunded projects. The attachment in your book item includes a copy of the funding augmentation request made to the administration. We will know by Friday how much funding is proposed for the ATP in the governor's May revision. The request we made is focused on funding as many projects from the current backlog that sufficiently demonstrated they met the scoring criteria in areas such as project need, benefits, and public engagement. This would result in over 300 additional projects totaling about $1.5 billion. There is a map in your book item showing the location of the projects, many of which are in areas of the state where we were not able to fund any projects in the current cycle due to lack of funding. These projects have already been reviewed and the vast majority are ready to start preliminary engineering in the upcoming fiscal year, allowing us to put additional funds to work as quickly as possible to stimulate the economy and make our streets safer and more accessible for bicyclists and pedestrians. With the remaining $500 million in our proposal, we would create a pilot program for new transformative and innovative projects, such as bicycle highways and complete streets networks, that we have been unable to focus on in the past due to the severe program funding constraints. We've received support letters for the proposal from regional and local agencies and stakeholder groups, which are included in the meeting materials. I'd now like to take a few moments to address some questions that have been raised regarding the proposal and clarify some issues. First, as I mentioned, our proposal would only fund projects from the backlog that have sufficiently demonstrated they met our scoring criteria, which would be any project scoring 60 points or higher on a 100-point scale. Since we already had enough funds to award projects scoring 92 and above, we would be picking up projects scoring between 60 and 92 points. Regarding these scores, I wanted to clarify that we do not use a report card grading system in the ATP. That is not how scoring rubrics are designed. And while the many individual criteria used to calculate the overall points, while there are many individual criteria used to calculate the overall points, I think the way to think about the aggregate scores is more like a tiered system. The highest scoring points, generally between 80 and 100, would have clearly and compellingly demonstrated evidence to meet the criteria. The next highest tier, which would be projects scoring between 60 and 80 points, generally would have demonstrated sufficient evidence, which means these are still good projects, but did not make quite as compelling a case as the higher scoring ones. Below 60 points, projects generally would have either only somewhat met the criteria or not at all, especially the lowest scoring ones. With that said, I wanted to focus for a few minutes on the projects that scored in the 60 to 80 point range. There are 160 of them, and I wanted to illustrate the importance of these projects. Almost all of them are located in disadvantaged communities, and over half of them are safe routes to school projects. These projects generally would have demonstrated sufficient public engagement, and half of them even scored in the highest points category on this criteria. I have a few examples of projects scoring between 60 and 80 points that I wanted to share. Brandy, if you could start the slides. Thanks. This project is proposed by the Round Valley tribal community in Mendocino County, where the median household income is well below the statewide average. The tribe envisions this project as a starting place for redeveloping the community, as it currently suffers from inadequate and decaying infrastructure. And you can see from the photos the lack of active transportation facilities in the area. The project area would connect students to local schools, and it currently lacks sidewalks and has very narrow shoulders. Next slide, please. This is a project proposed by the City of Needles in San Bernardino County. The project is located near 4 schools, multiple residential areas in the downtown region of the city. The median household income is well below the statewide average, and 3/4 of the students receive free or reduced price school meals. The project would provide safe walkways for pedestrian and bicycle traffic and connect disadvantaged residents to schools and event centers, providing sorely needed improvements to the infrastructure shown in the photos. Next slide, please. This is a Rails to Trails project in the city of La Habra in Orange County. The proposed project encompasses 4 disadvantaged census tracts that experience high levels of pollution. The project would close a gap in the Orange County Loop bike network and connect residents to jobs, parks, the library, and shopping. Next slide, please. This is a project in Los Nietos, a community in Los Angeles County with a large number of students receiving free or reduced price school meals and a median household income below the state average. The project would connect residents to schools, the local library, the community center, parks, and transit. It would add ADA accessibility features, high visibility crosswalks, shortened pedestrian crossings, and shade trees. You can see in the photos the lack of sidewalk and poor crossings in the area. Next slide, please. This project is in the disadvantaged community of South Oroville. 92% of families in Oroville live in poverty, and many lack access to a vehicle. Many areas of this rural community also lack basic active transportation infrastructure, such as crosswalks, sidewalks, and bikeways, as you can see in the photos. The project would provide connectivity to several key community destinations, including schools, a local park, several employment centers, churches, medical centers, affordable housing, and schools. Next slide, please. And finally, this is a project in the city of Selma in Fresno County. The project is located in the city's most disadvantaged neighborhood, which is currently cut off from the rest of the city by state routes 43 and 99. The project would provide connectivity to several key community destinations, including schools, parks, critical services, and employment centers, including by closing gaps in active transportation facilities as shown in the photos. Thank you, Brandy. You can take down the slides. So those were just 6 of the 160 projects scoring between 60 and 80 points that we would be able to fund with our request. We understand there may be other ideas to use a higher cut score in order to have more funds available for new projects, but I do want to emphasize that would mean leaving out some of the projects such as these that have already been reviewed and are ready to go in disadvantaged communities around the state. Lastly, I also wanted to say that with whatever funding may be available for new pilot projects, such as bicycle highways, we think it is imperative that these projects be done through the active transportation program. We have wanted to pilot ambitious transformative projects such as these for several years now, but have lacked funding to do it. We've also been encouraged by the legislature to move in this direction, and AB 1147 by our ex officio Commissioner Assemblymember Friedman would also create a bicycle highway pilot. We know there's been concern in the past about including large projects in the ATP because it would take up funding from smaller projects. However, this would not be the case under our proposal because we'd have a dedicated fund source for them. We have the program in place and the staff and the expertise to fund these projects, so we don't believe it should be included in different program outside the ATP or outside the CTC. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Paul. We do have public comment, so I'm going to take the public comment and then open it up to our commissioners in case they want to speak on behalf of anything that was presented in the public comment itself. So with that, Justin, could you start the public comment process?
Thank you, Chair Norton. Up first, we have Patricia Chen. Patricia, you're free to unmute yourself and make your comment.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Norton, and I'm going to read you all off. I'm not really sure who's all still on, but Chair Norton, Senator Newman, Assemblywoman Friedman, Commissioners, Secretary Kim, and Directors Weiss and Omishakin. I'm Patricia Chen with LA Metro, and Metro supports additional funding for the Active Transportation Program, and we congratulate you on your leadership on this. We particularly support funding for promising areas such as bicycle highways, which have potential to revolutionize commutes for many people. We look forward to working with you as your proposal makes its way through the process and comes to fruition. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Next comment.
Up next, we have Jonathan Matz.
Morning, good afternoon, commissioners and ex officios and staff. Thank you for this time. We're very excited at the opportunity to secure more funds at the Active Transportation. And I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. Jonathan Matz from the St. Brown's Partnership. We submitted a letter which I hope made it into your packets. 21 organizations co-signed. We have a slightly different proposal for these funds, and we lay out our reasoning in there. We, again, we're certainly cognizant of the fact that the threshold of 80 that we recommend limit of quality applications that come into the ATP. Saw that as perhaps a guide for where the future funding of the program should aim to settle in future cycles, and what we think is I think a realistic expectation of what future applicants should set their sights on in terms of where they should expect to land in order to receive funding, as well as recognizing and many of the signatories of our letter have been ATP evaluators before, that realizing that that's the most consistent indicator of not only which projects are located in disadvantaged communities or aim to serve school populations, but have demonstrated consistently across the board in terms both of public participation as well as in demonstrating that the scoped plan meets the demonstrated needs for safety. That it's most reliable and consistent benchmark in that sense. But of course, we're quite excited to to be working towards a common goal of securing more funds for the ATP cycle, and very eager as well to collaborate on putting the program on more sustainable financial footing in the cycles ahead. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next public comment.
Up next, we have Daniel Halden.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I'm Dan Halden. I'm the Heart of Hollywood Director for Los Angeles City Council member Mitch O'Farrell, who represents the 13th district that includes the Hollywood area. Thank you, Chair Norton. Thank you, commissioners, for all of your service. And I also want to especially thank Assembly Member Laura Friedman, our Assembly member. Thank you very much for your leadership, your partnership over the years, and also thank you to your staff, who is terrific. I also wanted to speak in support of item 18, the proposal to augment the wonderful ATP program with $1.5 billion to fund, as was mentioned, over 300 high-scoring projects, as well as the $500 million in the bike highway funds. Last year, the City of Los Angeles submitted numerous projects to ATP Cycle 5, including the Hollywood Boulevard Safety and Connectivity Project Phase 1, which is the first phase of Councilmember O'Farrell's Heart of Hollywood initiative. That focuses on historic Hollywood Boulevard and creating a more pedestrian-friendly street for everyone that provides a safe, welcoming experience for the millions and millions of diverse stakeholders who frequent the corridor in a normal year. And we're still getting a pretty, relatively high number even during the pandemic. Hollywood Boulevard is also a priority corridor and part of the City of Los Angeles High Injury Network, as determined by our Department of Transportation. Our ATP application is the first part of a master plan project which envisions the corridor with wider sidewalks, hundreds of new shade trees, a protected bicycle lane, and more space for people to use active transportation options and to enjoy a very busy area. There are millions of folks who come here, they try to walk down the street, they try to experience the street. That's in addition to the thousands of Angelinos who live and work either on or immediately adjacent to the corridor, and that number is growing. We've got 2 metro stops also that we want to be better connected to. Many of the stakeholders in Hollywood are working class individuals. The area qualifies as a disadvantaged community as referenced in our ATP application. And we believe very strongly that we need a street that is a space designed for and around people. There's been enormous support within the community for this project and lots of community engagement. I personally, on behalf of our office, have hosted 65 roundtables and counting, both in person and virtually, about half and half. And that's in addition to countless other meetings and conversations and events. There's an overall sense of excitement all across our diverse community for this vision of Hollywood Boulevard, both pre-COVID, but I'm happy to say, especially post-COVID, which I think has changed how we think about our public spaces, how important it is to gather within those spaces and to get around safely and to prioritize that. So bringing this to life, thank you very much.
Appreciate your testimony. Thank you very much. Next public comment.
Yes. Up next, we have Julia Randolph.
Good afternoon, commissioners, chair, ex officios, and staff. Julia Randolph with the Coalition for Clean Air. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. I am part of the letter that was discussed by Jonathan Matz, or the Coalition for Clean Air is on this letter that was sent out, I believe, Monday or yesterday. We believe also that the active transportation program has been oversubscribed since its creation, and that it's grown, particularly dire the last 2 cycles, but we believe that everybody should be getting a score from an 80 to 100 should be funded. And we have consistently advocated for realigning these state transportation dollars from other programs in order to achieve that sustainability. We understand that the 80 is a lower score. We understand that a lot of the projects that would be funded from a 60 to an 80 are in disadvantaged communities. But as Jonathan Matz discussed, being a previous scorer, a lot of these projects, we did not see the safety concerns or the public participation process, and that is also just as important in the application process. Further, we also, lowering that number to 80 allows $1 billion to then be allocated to the 2 pilot projects suggested, and we believe both of those should be. The first pilot program, $500 million for the 15-minute city, should be granted to the Strategic Growth Council because of their experience with competitive grant programs such as the Transformative Climate Communities. And then the other $500 million should be granted to Caltrans for the Bicycle Highway Pilot Program because they have had experience with pilot programs such as this one. We just want to reiterate that all proposals for ATP this year, including ours, are no substitute for the long-term funding needed to put the program on a more stable financial footing and align the state transportation investments with goals stated in the CAPTI framework. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Julia. Next public comment.
Yes, up next we have Deborah Murphy. Deborah, you're free to unmute yourself and make your comment. And Deborah just lowered her hand, so we will move on. Nayla Pardon.
Oh,
Nayla?
I think I hear Deborah.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
okay, sorry. Good day, commissioners. I'm Deborah Murphy. I'm a active transportation ATP grant coordinator, and I've worked on projects over the last five rounds and was very happy with the award that the commission made to the Canoga Park Urban Greening Project. But I want to strongly recommend the CTC support to encourage the governor to approve your budget request for both the additional funding for round 5 projects and for complete streets and bicycle highway projects. These kind of transformative projects, whether they're a small project in a rural area or a major network of projects like the Canoga Park project, really are going to help provide evidence how these strong networks can really change how Californians get around in their communities. During COVID-19, we've seen a lot more people out there walking and biking and rediscovering their neighborhoods, and people are going to want to continue to do that, but they need to be able to do it in a safe and comfortable manner in their neighborhoods. So they need sidewalks like we're shown in the slides that Paul shared with the commission today, in these communities that have no sidewalks or broken sidewalks and don't have bike lanes. So if we really want people to stay out there being active for their other health reasons, as well as their transportation and recreational needs, we need to be able to fund many more projects because we need this improvements now. We don't need them 20 years from now. We need them now because we need to improve our air quality. We need to help fight climate change. And this will help achieve a lot of California's goals for doing the climate adaptation and getting more active transportation and reducing our impacts on our environment. So thank you very much and appreciate all of your attention to this critical matter in California.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Next public comment.
Yes, up next we got Nayla Pardon.
Hello again, Commissioners. Nayla Pardon with Climate Plan. My comment is in support of the $2 billion ask for ATP. I want to commend Commissioner Alvarado for spearheading this conversation at the last commission meeting. We greatly appreciate those comments then and look forward to working with you more on this. In general, I would hate to be characterized as not wanting more projects in disadvantaged communities and safe route projects. I think in general, we support every bike lane, any community that wants a bike lane in this state to have one. I think what is really important to think about is with this $2 billion ask, we don't just want it to go directly to, we don't want the type of projects that Paul laid out in his presentation to just be at the whim of budget surplus and $2 billion ask. We really want to be able to spend this $2 billion getting to the systemic issues in some of the processes that have those projects scoring low in the first place. And that's partially why in the letter that advocates wrote that Jonathan mentioned earlier, and Julia alluded to also, why we have a different threshold, but we really want to see funding go to some of these pilot projects, giving communities another opportunity to apply for funding for active transportation projects. We definitely see it as working together and giving communities the best opportunity and the best chance to get projects, active transportation projects in their community, and greatly look forward to working with the commission further on how we can make guideline processes more inclusive for communities and how we can continue to divert more funding to the active transportation program.
Thank you very much, Nayla. Next public comment.
Yes, up next we have Claire Gallagher.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is Claire Gloogly with the City of Santa Cruz. First up, I want to say thank you for taking this up as something that deserves a lot of attention. We are extremely supportive of the staff recommendation and really appreciate the work of Lori, Paul, and their teams. The ATP has been critical in our community for achieving policy goals of mode shift, greenhouse gas reductions, improved safety, and creating jobs. Our community has two projects that would advance with the recommended augmentation. And to make these real for you as a jurisdiction that's actually implementing and actually benefiting the people in our communities, the first is a rail trail project that scored 87. It would build 2.18 miles of multi-use paths connecting DEC communities, including direct connections to a Boys and Girls Club, a state park, 4 schools, a community center, and our public parks and beaches. The second project scored an 82, is also a multi-use trail and sidewalk infill that fills a gap in our already separated network and directly connects to the University of California, Santa Cruz Coastal Sciences campus, a state park, an industrial job center, and a K-12 school. This is incredibly important to our community to continue to be able to access funds through this program to advance these critical projects, which would be impossible to fully fund locally. To reiterate, we are incredibly supportive of the staff recommendation, lowering the threshold to 60 and being able to advance these types of projects throughout the state of California. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks, Claire, for your testimony. Next speaker.
Up next, we have Kiana Valentine.
Thank you, Kiana.
Kiana, you're currently self-muted. You're free to unmute yourself and make a comment.
Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. Kiana Valentine on behalf of Transportation California, in strong support of the one-time $2 billion appropriation for the active transportation program. Pardon me. Transportation California supports the concept of funding projects that score 60 and above, and want to recognize the CTC staff's experience and knowledge in the programming of active transportation projects, and respect their analysis that 60 to 79 points are still good projects worthy of funding and merit consideration for this appropriation. At the same time, in recognition of what Nayla Pardon and some of her colleagues mentioned about wanting to leverage the dollars for new and innovative pilot programs, we are supportive of that, and also recognize that some deserving projects could apply to access some of this funding if given the opportunity. We've heard from a number of agencies that we've been engaging with that they didn't apply in the last round due to timing, due to lack of funding, et cetera. And so we also want to balance the need to ensure that the most high-rising projects get funded. As was mentioned earlier, let me also just nod a quick nod of support for the CTC having programmatic control and oversight over any new pilot program. That makes the most sense to us. Again, a nod to the CTC's knowledge, experience, programming these types of transportation projects. As mentioned earlier, Transportation California is working with a growing coalition of stakeholders pursuing additional one-time funding for transportation in the budget beyond active transportation, and that's in recognition that numerous programs beyond the ATP are also oversubscribed. That being said, a number of these programs could very well benefit bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, such as the new Sustainable Communities Block Grant that's proposed, and even highway safety improvement projects have benefits for bicycle and safety infrastructure. So just want to put a plug in for those appropriations and those requests as well. At the end of the day, we're open and flexible to working with the commission, staff, and all stakeholders to try to craft an augmentation that maximizes outcomes for the variety of communities across California. And look forward to working on the May revise this Friday and seeing what we can get done in the state budget. Thanks so much.
Right on time, Kiana. Pretty impressive. Thank you for your testimony. Next testimony.
Up next, we have Mike Woodman.
Chair Norton, members of the commission, thank you for the opportunity to comment today. Mike Woodman, Executive Director of the Nevada County Transportation Commission and also Chair of the North State Super Region. Wanted to lend my support of the CTC staff proposal to augment the ATP Cycle 5 program and fund projects down to 60. Many smaller cities and counties don't have a lot of staff resources and sometimes technical expertise to prepare these applications. Projects down to 60 are still worthy of funding. They're good projects. They meet the intent of the program. And just to give you an example, in Nevada County, the Nevada County Transportation Commission submitted 2 larger transformative projects, and we worked with a consultant to help us prepare those applications. The County of Nevada, as well as the town of Truckee, submitted applications for the ATP program, but they prepared those applications in-house. And I'm familiar with those projects, the Truckee River Legacy Trail, and also the Combi Road ATP safety program, as well as the Rough and Ready roundabout safety crossing project. All those projects are great projects, but the staff just don't have the resources, without consultant help. Each cycle has gotten more competitive. And for rural smaller agencies, we have heard over the last couple of cycles that folks are getting discouraged and thinking about, not putting the effort into continuing to apply for this program. With the additional funding going into the ATP, we encourage them to continue and try to provide assistance through Caltrans and CTC to help them improve their applications. But these projects, as you saw, that were presented by Paul in his slides, these are good projects. So I encourage you to support the staff proposal, fund the projects down to 60, will really make a huge benefit across the state. And cycle 6, we can get more projects in there. So appreciate staff's proposal and thank you for your support on this issue.
Thank you very much, Mike. Next speaker.
Up next, we have Chris Wilson.
Good afternoon, Chair Norton, Assemblymember Friedman, Senator Newman. Want to thank you all. My name is Chris Wilson, representing the Los Angeles County Business Federation. You know it as LA BizFed. Want to really thank the CTC and CalSTA's work around the active transportation program and the augmentation proposal. Know that BizFed is wrapping its arms around this proposal. We're in the process of sending a letter to not only the legislature, but to the governor for the many benefits that was mentioned before. We feel that the ATP connects people to education, to jobs, to getting people out of their cars and to really enjoy God's great environment. We also want to support the ATP because it provides less resistance on SB1, something that many of you know that the business community and BizFed was very instrumental in helping pass and upholding through Proposition 6. So just know that you could always work with the business community on programs like this. It very much speaks to our calling and the need. So I just want to again thank you, Chair Norton, CTC staff, and members for your support of the augmentation proposal. And please consider us a partner moving forward on anything that you need. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. Much appreciated. Next speaker.
Thank you, Chair Norton. Just want to indicate that I only see one more attendee with their hand raised this time. Up next, we have Debbie Hale.
Debbie?
Hi, the sound cut out for a minute there. I hope you can hear me. My name's Debbie Hale. I'm the Executive Director of the Transportation Agency for Monterey County. And I wanted to speak in support of both proposals, the $2 billion to fund the projects going down to 60 points, as well as the transformative bike highways. The two probably lowest income, most needy areas of our county are where farm workers are living, the unincorporated areas of Chualar and San Ardo, and projects in both of those towns to help school children walk to the elementary school sidewalks and such would be included in the new threshold, and so we very much support it. I also wanted to note that there may be some duplicative projects within the list. For instance, our project that I would hope would qualify as a bike highway is the Fort Ord Regional Trail and Greenway. If those of you familiar with our coastal trail, this will connect, it'll be a 28-mile trail through the former Fort Ord that will connect not only to the coastal trail, but also to the Fort Ord National Monument, residents of disadvantaged communities and schools. And we applied for one large segment and one smaller sub-segment, and the larger segment would be funded under this proposal, as would the smaller segment. And so that the staff did encourage us to submit projects like that. And so I would imagine there may be other duplicative projects in the list. So something to keep in mind to help fund the Bike Highways program. And then finally, I just want to support others who have said, we'd love to have this flow, any of the new money flow through the ATP program, because the process the staff does complete with the participation of folks and the debriefings is really collaborative, and we sincerely appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Debbie. Appreciate it. Next speaker.
Up next, we have Nadine Barrett.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I wanted to speak to express support for the proposed $2 billion augmentation of the ATP and funding for projects down to a score of 60. In rural areas, we have some of the most disadvantaged communities in the state with very limited transportation options, including the community where the Round Valley Tribal Project shown in Paul's presentation is. However, due to low population and limited staff resources, we know it's a long shot every time we put in the effort to prepare an application. And that effort is no joke. These applications are a major undertaking. At the same time, rural regions have less funding from fewer sources than urban areas, so we're even more reliant upon these competitive grant programs to fund large projects. This augmentation of the ATP will allow many really good ATP projects around the state, including those in disadvantaged rural communities, to move forward. So I just wanted to express my support for that and thank CTC staff for working on this.
Thank you so much, Tafili. Appreciate your testimony. Justin, does that conclude our public testimony?
Yes, Chair Norton. I see no other attendee with their hand raised at this time.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'm going to call on Commissioner Kehoe, and I have a couple of follow-up questions. Commissioner Kehoe.
Thank you, Hillary. I'll be very brief because all I can do is echo about every single one of the public speakers. I did want to let the commissioners know I received a call from one of the assembly members that represents a portion of San Diego County. She has 5 projects that are not funded, despite 4 of them being in the mid to high 80s. So the critical need for the augmentation is there all across the state. I'm sure many other parts of the county have equally sad stories of not being able to make the cutoff of 92%, a rating of 92, which means we're leaving so many unfunded projects out there. So I just think we need to work very hard. I would like to just add, if the augmentation goes through as we hope, that we will fund these projects that were in the last round and keep them moving forward. The work's been done. They're ready to go in many cases. They are in disadvantaged communities also in many cases. So I think that's an important issue. Let's try to work on that. And Paul, thanks for all the info.
Thank you so much. I see Commissioner Liu on the screen. Commissioner Liu, did you have some comments?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address this. Well, you know, different stakeholders seem to have some different proposals on how to spend the $2 billion on active transportation. I don't see anyone disagreeing on the need or the amount of investment needed. And so I think the question really is, how do we get this done? We have a limited amount of time. We really need the active and unwavering commitments of people to, you know, work on this during the next 4 weeks, because this is the opportunity that we have. And I'd like to propose a 4-step strategy. So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but I've seen it work in the past. I think it could work again. The first is to reach a consensus position. And that means everyone getting together, all the people who have testified in support of this, and try to form a grand alliance. You know, I like the idea and the comment that, you know, of being flexible on the approach here. Let's be flexible, see what we can get in terms of a consensus position as step 1. Step 2, let's get the mother of all sign-on letters with everybody who we could possibly get signed on to a support letter that, even if it's just the general $2 billion being spent, is everyone supporting it. And step 3 would be then communicating that in meetings, if it's possible, or through staff meetings with the big 3. We need to put together you guys really agree on this coalition? Because that has an enormous effect when they're, you know, the people in the big 3 are trying to make tough decisions at the last minute. We come in with a consensus position to them, and I saw that Assembly Democrats have already prioritized fully funding active transportation. We'll know in the next day or 2 or 3 whether the governor has accepted this idea. So we're almost there. And then finally, step 4 would be to meet with the budget committee chairs and subcommittee chairs and convince them to support it too. If we do these 4 things, I think we can actually pull this off. And I'm really encouraged. I'm willing to spend time on this, and I hope others would be too. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I wanted to ask Paul, is there any reason that this proposal we talk about it being one-time money, that we can't talk about it instead of a one-time proposal, that we can talk about this as a first-time proposal? Is there any reason that we couldn't be asking for the same amount of money or a diminished amount of money next year and the year after and the year after that, as CTC has a long legacy of wanting to increase ATP funding, as we recommended in our annual report, that we wanted to see more funding come from cap and trade?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the reason why I think it's been framed as a one-time augmentation is just we're in a very unique situation with the state general fund surplus. And I think there may be a hesitancy to commit to ongoing funds, since it's sort of a result of an unprecedented stock market boom and some other circumstances. But that said, you know, we do agree that there needs to be an ongoing solution for sure. So I think we're hopeful that this one-time augmentation would be so large And if we funded all of the projects down to 60 like we're proposing, that would really help at least for the next couple cycles, kind of clear out the backlog. But certainly, yes, we do need to work on an ongoing funding solution as well.
Thank you very much. Mitch and Paul, I was wondering, Commissioner Liu recommended an interesting process, and I was wondering if we can assign you to take that under advisement and to consider our process moving forward.
Yeah, we are happy. We have had conversations with all of different stakeholders, people that have spoke today and others, and there's obviously different perspectives, but we are more than happy to keep meeting and convening with people.
Okay, and then we are going to advise the people who testified today to continue to be advocating to their legislators and to the governor's budget staff.
Yes, so the administration will publicly reveal its proposal sometime this week, but it'll be important for people who support the proposal to communicate to the legislature as well as the administration. The budget still has another month to go, so there's 4 weeks left to advocate for increased funding, regardless of what we see in the May revision that comes out.
Thank you very much. I see that there's no additional public comment and that this is an information item. So if there are no other commissioners and ex officio members who wish to speak, Senator Newman, I see you raise your hand. Yes.
Thank you, Chair Norton. So I just want to commend Assemblywoman Friedman, but also sort of reinforce what Commissioner Liu has said. I serve on both the Transportation and Budget committees. And to your point, Chair, by all means, I mean, Paul is absolutely right that we're in a very unique position with respect to the state's fiscal position. There is no better time to secure these funds. And so I'm glad to be an advocate, but I would, certainly recommend to everybody here to advocate with your respective members and also with budget staff. And I do think there's a favorable prospect for doing some really exciting work here. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment. With that, I believe we have completed our testimony on this particular item, and we look forward to hopefully a good result in the governor's May revise and the legislature. With that, we will go on to our item, which is item 24, the update on commission workshops on the climate action plan for transportation and infrastructure. CAPTI. Matthew?
Thank you, Chair Norton, and good afternoon, commissioners and ex officio members, Senator Newman and Assemblymember Friedman. Tab 24 is an information item to update the commission on the two CTC-hosted CAPTI workshops held back on April 20th and April 23rd. At the March 24th, 2021 commission meeting, commission staff were directed to hold these two public workshops to discuss the climate action plan for transportation infrastructure, also known as CAPTI. As a result of that direction, commission staff held public workshops to cover the proposed implementation of the CAPTI in each of its 7 draft strategies. In brief, CalSTA has led the development of the CAPTI, which they describe as a holistic investment framework which outlines accompanying strategies and actions on how the state should invest billions of dollars of transportation funding where state agencies play a role in project selection or nomination. The investment framework strategies and actions help the transportation sector aggressively combat and adapt to the climate crisis while supporting public health, safety, and social equity goals. CAPTI maintains California's commitment to continue a fix-it-first approach to maintaining the state's highways, roads, and bridges. The two CTC-hosted workshops were attended by a diverse set of participants representing advocacy organizations, nonprofit organizations, private industry, labor organizations, public agencies, and members of the public from nearly every geographic region of the state. There was attendance of roughly 225 and 170 participants at each workshop, respectively. Approximately 40 individuals representing a wide range of interests provided comments during these workshops. Public comments were made verbally during each workshop, with a wide range of opinions being shared. Here's a high-level summary of some common themes heard among the comments. The CAPTI should preserve the intent of SB1 and its outline for funding initiatives. The CAPTI development did not sufficiently involve stakeholders representing labor and business. There is a desire for representation on CAPTI implementation work groups to include more than just state agency representatives. CAPTI should further consider the differences between the needs of urban, rural, and suburban regions in the state and offer varied approaches. The CAPTI is a good starting point to address climate change and transportation funding, but it needs to go further and is the bare minimum action that needs to be taken. The CAPTI outlines equity well, but equity needs to be further embedded in California's transportation funding decisions. A 15-page document including a full list of comments received during the 2 commission-hosted workshops is included in attachment A of this item, which was sent out this past Friday as a yellow update to this book item. The public comment period for the draft CAPTI ends on May 19th, 2021. Organizing and facilitating the workshops on short notice required the support of individuals from multiple departments, and I would like to thank the following people for their contributed efforts. Darwin Musavi of CalSTA, Jeannie Ward-Waller and Tony Dang of Caltrans, and the following commission staff: Christine Gordon, Kayla Giese, Doug Remedios, Justin Hall, Randy Fleming, Beverly Newman-Burkhardt, and Anya Allenbacher. Again, this is an action item, this is an information item, forgive me, so no action is needed. At this time, I'd like to close my remarks and take any comments or questions that the public or commissioners may have. I will also add that I'm joined by Darwin Musavi, the Deputy Secretary for Environmental Policy and Housing Coordination at the California State Transportation Agency, who will also be available to respond to any comments or questions.
Great. Justin, do we have any public comment items?
Yes, Chair Norton, thank you. We have 2 attendees at this time indicating they wish to make public comment. Up first, we have Chris Wilson.
Good afternoon again, Chair and CTC staff, Senators Newman and Assemblymember Friedman. I just wanted to comment on CAPTI. First of all, thank CTC and CalSTA in working with us and hosting a BizFed workshop on CAPTI on April 27th. We had nearly 50 people of the business community comment and really provide their thoughts and feelings on CAPTI and how to really improve it. I just want to urge you that we will be commenting and deadline by May 19th from the community. I would really want to challenge you. I know that you mentioned before during the update, and thank you, Matt, for the detailed update, that there lacks a business community input. We'll just know that we have a letter coming that really includes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into the CAPTI plan, and really provides some anecdotal evidence on how we can all move CAPTI together in an equitable and balanced way. So just know that we really appreciate you continuing to elevate CAPTI, and it's really important to us, and really important to the business community. And again, we challenge you to take into consideration our plans and our feedback for CAPTI. So thank you very much. And again, this is Chris Wilson, Los Angeles County Business Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for your testimony. Next public comment.
Up next, we have Julia Randolph.
Good afternoon again, Chair, ex officios, commissioners, and staff. Julia Randolph with the Coalition for Clean Air again. I just wanted to make brief comments on the workshops that CTC held. We're very grateful for the way that they're held and all the strategies that were gone over. I participated in both of these workshops, and I also participated in the Department of Public Health's workshop around the CAPTI framework. And, there were comments on both sides. The business community has definitely shown up more, but I do think that, moving forward, we do see that this is still the minimum and should be implemented into our guidelines moving forward. We have a comment letter in the works that will be sent into CalSTA that I'm sure will also be taken into consideration within this process. But, we just want to thank Matthew for his continued work on this, and especially and making the SB1 workshops moving forward very well known, and the kickoff program and all of that, I'm sure, will be announced at a different time, but we just wanted to thank him for his continued work on that. But moving forward, we still stand the same position of these being implemented into the guidelines as soon as possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Julia. Next public comment.
Up next, we have Kiana Valentine.
Thank you,
Good
Kiana.
afternoon. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. Kiana Valentine on behalf of Transportation California. I just want to say thank you to the Commission staff, to Matthew and his colleagues, to Kelsa, to Darwin, to Jeannie, the entire team inside the administration for the 2 CTC workshops. The CTC and the entire team executed those workshops in short order, and I thought they were incredibly effective forums for communicating concerns, communicating support, asking questions, and having some additional much-needed meaningful dialogue. Transportation California and our labor and management partners submitted a coalition letter outlining our concerns with the draft CAPTI. I am pleased to report that we've had 2 substantial follow-up calls with Secretary Kim and his staff since that time, and look forward to continued conversations on how we can influence the final draft CAPTI document. I think I can summarize that while we don't disagree with the goals of CAPTI, we just don't agree yet on the proposed strategies and how to get there. I think if I could urge one thing today, it is that for CalSTA and the administration to provide additional data, evidence, support for the strategies that they propose, so that we can make a true analysis of how we think the proposed strategies will play out, impact existing transportation programs, and the like. Finally, I would like to say that we take seriously the CAPTI and the climate goals of the state. And it was the lens, one of 2 lenses in which we used to develop our coalition transportation funding proposal for the 21-22 state budget. Everything in there was viewed with a climate lens, and we think that the programs that we support, one-time investments, will help the state achieve its climate transportation goals. So we look forward to, again, working on that budget proposal in the coming weeks. And thank you so much for the opportunity to comment again today.
Thank you, Kiana. We just want to make sure that your voice is heard and to find out whether or not we have additional public comment.
Yes, at this time, up next, we have Jonathan Matz. Jonathan, you're self-muted. You're free to unmute yourself and make your comment.
I didn't realize that I also needed to unmute myself. Good afternoon, Jonathan Matz here once again from the Safe Routes Partnership. And we were able to participate in the workshops as well as the ones organized by. I wanted to echo the comments of my colleague, my partner, Julia Randolph earlier. We think CAPTI is a terrific start, and also needs to be well. We really do think this is a critical moment for the state to reckon with how it's funding transportation, and how the transportation sector needs really a thorough rethinking and reorientation in order to meet our goals for conservation, for climate, and one of the main tools to meeting our climate goals, in fact, the most critical one, according to the Air Resources Board, is reducing vehicle miles traveled. So making sure that the investments that we're making into the transportation sector are in unison in reaching that goal is critical, we believe. And we don't think at this point that the data is in any way insufficient for that. As I mentioned before, SB 743, the report that Air Resources Board put out on the progress or lack of progress so far meeting our climate goals, we think. So this really is a matter of putting our money where our mouth is, and we are relying on all agencies that oversee transportation in one way or the other to work.
Mr. Metz, you cut out. Does that conclude your testimony?
It does. I'm not sure at what point I cut out, but.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your comments today. Next public comment.
Up next, we have William Barrett. William, you're free to unmute yourself and make a comment.
Thank you very much. I'm Will Barrett. I'm the Director of Clean Air Advocacy for the American Lung Association. First of all, I want to say thank you to Matthew and all the team who's been working on this, the CAPTI process for so long. I do appreciate that CTC added to the growing list of public dialogue opportunities for the CAPTI process, and we participated in several of those over the last year, basically, to provide our input and support for the implementation of the CAPTI framework that's still coming together, but we're very hopeful that it continues to move forward and retains its focus on improving health, improving equity conditions, and really adding a new layer of thought into transportation investments and land use planning so that we're better aligned with our climate standards. So in general, I wanted to highlight that I submitted a letter on behalf of the Lung Association to the Commission. And what it really gets to is that, California has the most difficult air pollution challenges in the United States. The transportation sector is the leading source of our harmful air pollution burdens. And we know that those burdens aren't felt equally across all Californians. We know that lower income communities, communities of color often bear the brunt of transportation pollution burdens. We know that transportation pollution, especially particle pollution, is responsible for thousands of deaths every year in California, and many, many more thousands of other health impacts such as asthma attacks, heart attacks and strokes, and particle pollution actually can also cause lung cancer. So we view the CAPTI process as critical to really turning this corner into building a healthier, more sustainable transportation system that works for all communities, for all residents of California. And we think that it's important to note that when we look at the data for air pollution monitoring across the United States, we see the Inland Empire and the San Joaquin Valley as the most polluted counties in the United States. They dominate all the lists of most polluted. We know that transportation is a major source of this pollution burden in these two regions, and that the implementation of the vision that has been set forth through the CAPTI drafts to date really are going to solidify health benefits in these regions that need it the most. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you again. I look forward to the ongoing discussion to round out the CAPTI process and really urge CTC to start the process as quickly as possible to implement updates to the guidelines to make sure that all projects in the pipeline and all projects coming forward are aligned with this vision of healthier, more sustainable transportation in California. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Justin, are there any other public comments?
Yes, Chair Norton, I see one more attendee at this time looking to make a comment. Up next, we have Mike Woodman.
Thank you, Mr. Woodman.
Chair Norton, fellow commissioners, ex officio members, thank you for the opportunity to address this issue again. First, I want to thank the CTC team for pulling together these workshops in short order, and Darwin Wasabi at CalSTA for his participation and willingness to accept additional comments and to extend the comment period. It's greatly appreciated. It was critical to have this opportunity to provide additional comments because we have to get this right. The CAPTI is going to drive investment decisions and impact other planning documents such as the Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan. And we have to make sure that we don't disadvantage rural projects and critical interregional highway projects that are needed to address safety and are gap closures. They're also needed to provide safe evacuation in high wildfire risk areas. And these projects, rural induced demand is different from urban induced demand research, and transportation engineers and professionals will tell you that. These projects do not increase significant VMT, and they actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve multimodal mobility. So, look forward to continued discussions with CalSTA on this issue to make sure we get the language right and don't disadvantage these critical corridors that aren't complete. These are gap closure projects, and with our small funding share, we chip away at these things a couple miles at a time, and we can't abandon these critical corridors. So we have to get this right. So thank you for the opportunity for additional comments, and really appreciate the effort.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm informed that this is the end of the public comment, and so I'd like to recognize Vice Chair Bob Alvarado.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matthew, a question on process. So we've had these and all the comments were brought forward. What's the process now for the CAPTI document? Are we going to maybe modify the draft, or are we just going to attach these comments and keep the draft as it is?
That is a good question, Vice Chair Alvarado. And honestly, from a CTC staff perspective, we would not play a direct role, I think, in the incorporation of any comments or suggestions into the final document. However, CalSTA will be accepting and I think being in close collaboration with CTC staff, Caltrans staff, and the interagency working group on whether changes will be made to the CAPTI document or how responses will be made, or like a response to comments that they've heard that will not be incorporated. But I see Darwin come off, and I'll ask him to elaborate.
Yeah, I just see that he stepped in, so maybe it's a better question for Darwin.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Matthew. Happy to answer the question. As Matthew was saying, we're currently still in the mode of compiling stakeholder feedback. Our process going forward is just to walk through the steps. Public comment period will close next week on May 19th. Thereafter, we plan to review the public comments in great detail. We're compiling those currently. We'll actually make all the public comment letters available publicly on the CalSTA website once we have all of those, so folks can see the whole range of public comments as well as the summary from the workshops that CPC has compiled. We'll then work through our interagency work group process, which includes CPC staff, to determine the best path forward on addressing the broad spectrum of the stakeholder comments. And we do intend to do our best to incorporate as many of the comments as we can. And then from there, we do plan to come back to the CPC in June with an update on anticipated changes to CAPTI as it relates to the CTC actions that are included in the plan. And then the final plan, which is broader than the CTC actions in particular, the entirety of the plan will be released in July. So we'll continue to coordinate closely with the Commission to finalize the CTC led actions in the plan. As we've said before, I think it's critical for agencies to work together to ensure the successful implementation of CAPTI. And yes, our plan is still to have a final document be public no later than July 15th. Hopefully that answers your question.
Well, but you're telling me we are gonna incorporate the comments into a new draft and not just attach them to the document.
Yes, it's our intent to take in all the public comments and work our best to incorporate as many of them as we can. As we've heard a broad range of comments, so it'll be a challenging task to incorporate every comment, but we will be certainly trying our best to incorporate as many of them as we can.
Okay, because I'm just going to be upfront with you. I'll be very disappointed if it's the same draft that we've seen from the beginning, just represented with attachments. So you can.
There will indeed be updates made to the document, Commissioner. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, well, Commissioner Liu, I see you've turned on your video. Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, just briefly, and not to the core issues. I mean, I am thankful we had the extra workshops, and I agree with Vice Chair Alvarado that all this feedback should lead to some changes. But one of the important components of the preliminary draft that we've been reviewing is, trying to get the communities most impacted by transportation investments a meaningful voice in our planning and program development issues. And that can't happen unless we let people know what's going on well in advance. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank staff for publishing a save the date document in the workshop sections of our website this week, I think it was, where, it might sound like a small thing, but the SB1 guidelines development process for the competitive programs, the workshops are an important place for people to have a say in what we do. And obviously this is a key to how we as CTC are going to approach whatever CalSTA adopts in terms of CAPTI. And it's not really a small thing in the end. I mean, getting this save the date document out early, like we have, really, allows people to put it on their calendars, and through virtual meetings like this, everyone can participate, and gives them an opportunity to not only just the transportation advocates, but everyone to participate in a meaningful way in our guidelines development process. So I wanted to thank staff for doing that. It's a small step, but it's an important one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other commissioners who wish to speak? Okay, seeing none, I am going to end this item, and I'm going to call for a 15-minute break. We'll resume our meeting at 2:15. Thank you very much.